Hey guys, I'm back again with a new video. So today I want to talk about 5 things I want to see in Battlefield 6, or at least that I hope to see. But before we begin with this video, I just wanted to thank you all for watching my last video. 5,000 views, that is amazing. Thank you so much, and keep subscribing and keep sharing, and hopefully I can grow this channel and maybe we can do this on a more regular occurrence. All right, anyway, so let's jump in. So first up, we got the shared server software. So what do I mean with this? Why am I not saying RSP? Well, the thing is, RSP is, very, very important because you need to be able to create your own custom servers. You need to be able to play with your friends without having, disruptions from maybe, super high skilled players or maybe from cheaters that you want to ban and kick out of your server. It could also be that, some things are pretty OP and you want to disable them and so forth. All these basic things that you want to do. And especially, when the game gets old, maybe if there's, DLC maps, you can't really play them as often anymore as you like because the gaming population for that game is just so small. So you want to be able to, set up these servers and play any type of map that you want. But in recent times, another more important aspect of this has appeared. And this is why I'm not only saying RSP, but shared server software. So as you know, old games are disappearing, and when it comes to Battlefield, we've lost Bad Company 1, we've lost Bad Company 2, and recently we also lost Battlefield 3 on consoles, which is now gone because the game service is shut down. And to me, this isn't just like lost media or an inaccessible video game, but it's actually a piece of history and culture. This is just lost now because a company wants to improve their bottom line, right? Because I understand, like, this costs money, and if there's almost nobody playing the game, why should a company waste money on that and pay for the servers? But that's what I'm saying. This is why it's so important that the server software should, when possible, be shared with the player. Because, imagine, let's say that you're a Metallica fan, and you want to show your kids the album that you listened to when you were growing up. And then you show them that, and wait a minute, half the songs are gone, and you can't play them anymore. And all that remains is, the music videos on YouTube without any audio. So that's kind of the way that I see it, where it's like, the game, sure, you can play single player in Battlefield 3, but that's it. You can't play multiplayer, and that's gone. And I think that is so sad because that's a piece of history that is now, it's basically gone. So please, let's bring, first of all, let's bring RSP back, but secondly, let's bring back, sharing the server files with the players, like we did in 1942, and I think in Battlefield 2 as well. So totally possible, totally doable. It just has to be planned from the beginning so that can be given to players. All right, next up, simplify vehicles. So, since Battlefield 3 and onward, the vehicles have become more and more complicated in terms of features and also customization, which in turn means that the combat gameplay is much more difficult to read, which leads to unpredictable and unbalanced gameplay. So I think the peak complexity was in Battlefield 5, with its extensive skill tree, and also with the many upgrades. It makes it pretty much impossible to distinguish in the heat of battle, what type of enemy you will be facing, what type of, cannons they're using, what types of armor they're using, if they're using some kind of self-repair gadget or whatever. It's just impossible to tell. And also there's the whole part of the multi-layer damage, which affects the vehicle in a realistic way. But it becomes kind of annoying because basically, you're doing the damage and then, it didn't explode. In fact, it just became a little bit slower, and then you gotta, keep going at it. So I think what I would like to see is simpler damage models. So basically keep the details, like, the ricochet and wheels falling off and, these nice details. Keep those, but remove as much of the gameplay as possible. Because, for example, one thing that it really affects is the ability for cars to explode in a spectacular way. Like, for example, in Bad Company 2, if you were firing the RPG at a Humvee that was driving at high speed, the Humvee would flip up in the air and explode. In Battlefield 3, where they have the vehicle disabled, all that happens is that it drives and goes, and then it stops. So I think these things are, getting in the way of the explosiveness, of the epicness, and it's just like a gameplay layer that just isn't needed. let's keep the visual, but let's remove some of that, that gameplay detail, which I think is totally unnecessary. Another thing, the excessive skill tree, I think, in there, I think there should be a few things that you can select, but I think they should be fairly limited so that when you're facing a vehicle, you're actually able to, first of all, tell what they're using, and second of all, also so you can remember what it is. Because, for example, in Battlefield 3, I think there's 6 things that a jet can choose. If you play the game for a while, you will start to know oh, he has this or he has that or whatever, right? But if you play a game that has, multiple things, it's really, really hard to remember and makes it even more difficult to count. Another thing with vehicles is also the vehicle spawn menu. So this is something that I really dislike. And the reason why I dislike it is because it removes a lot of immersion. I think vehicles, they add purpose by giving the flags a value, right? So when you're playing the game and you're capturing a flag and you know that, hey, if I capture this flag, I'm gonna get a helicopter, that adds value to the game. And I think also there's immersion with, when you spawn in the map in your base and you actually run to the vehicle. I think that is such a cool moment, taking off with the airplane from the runway, and then you see the tanks driving, everybody's rushing to the goal. I think this is something that is so immersive and so Battlefield, and I'm really not a big fan of the vehicle spawning, and also the vehicle spawning in the menus. If you can select any vehicle that you want through the vehicle spawning, it also removes the value of it, because basically any vehicle can appear on any map. So you're not looking forward to oh, we're playing this map now, it has this tank or it has that jet or whatever, right? So it just becomes I'll just choose whatever I like. And, if you're a fan of a certain vehicle, you'll only choose that vehicle instead of being forced to play different vehicles, which I think is a lot more fun and adds a lot of value in my opinion. The resupply stations, I would really like to see those gone. This just enables coward gameplay, Why would you take the risk to drive out into the field, into the flags, and really go close quarters with the tanks, when you could just stay in the back and, reload in this resupply station and try to lob in the bullets? I think that gets extremely dull, and we saw that in Battlefield 5, which had extremely dull tank gameplay. So I would very much prefer that the gameplay was timer based, so like Battlefield 3 and like Battlefield 4. All right, next up we got chunkier weapons. So with Bad Company 2 and Battlefield 3, weapons had a certain punch to them, but when it comes to the audio and the feeling of weight, I feel like we've lost something since Battlefield 4. Basically, besides Battlefield 1, Battlefield 1 is an exception. I think from Battlefield 4 and onward, the weapons have started to feel a lot more lighter, and it's much more similar to what you would find in a Call of Duty game. And what I mean by that, so first of all, is the animations. So they play a part in how fast something looks and how it feels, basically. So I feel like things have started moving a lot faster since Battlefield 4. And also the rate of fire of weapons, a lot of the guns have very fast rate of fire. And I feel like rate of fire doesn't have to be super realistic, You can do it a little bit slower than the real life counterpart. I'm not saying go super slow motion, but I'm saying maybe it needs to be tweaked down a little bit to make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more impactful. Another thing is the weapon sounds, that they don't have the same echo like they used to do. If you remember Bad Company 2, the weapons were really loud. They would echo like crazy. Just like, for example, in Battlefield 3, the LMGs, they had such a bassy sound that would kind of if you play that in a surround system, you would feel the vibrations and how heavy it felt. And I feel like in the later games, it's starting to feel more like paintball or like something like Call of Duty, much faster. And I understand, yeah, okay, they've designed it that way to make it more competitive with the gameplay, because if the audio is too loud, it's going to be hard to hear where people are coming from. But I think it is at the sacrifice of player immersion. And I think, to me at least, Battlefield is a game that has a lot of immersion, and that's why I love Battlefield. So that is super, super important for me. All right, and next up we got co-op gadgets and vehicles. So this was something that I really loved in the past games. Like, for example, in Battlefield 3, they had the Soul Flam that you could place out, and then the Javelin from the other players would track vehicles and auto-hit based on that. In Bad Company 2, they had the amazing tracking dart, where if you shot that and managed to hit a vehicle, the engineers' RPGs would automatically hit those targets. So these are really, really great tools for cooperation. And I would love to see more things like that. Maybe even a gadget that you need to be 4 people to use that properly. I think that would be so much fun. And, make it a little bit challenging. But if you manage to pull it off, you're going to get a great reward. So, I can get really creative and come up with a lot of cool ideas, but I think you guys can imagine it yourself. All right. And when it comes to vehicles, I would love to see a 2-seater airplane. One who is flying the jet and the other one that's using the weapon system. I think that would be so amazing to be able to do that. A plane where you have to cooperate and talk to each other to make it work. I also, really want to see gadget dependencies. Let engineers prepare the vehicles. No more vehicle auto repairs and things like that. Be dependent on the other classes. That's something that I really, really want to see. All right. And then the last point for today. So maps designed by mode. So for example, in the past in Bad Company 2 and Battlefield 3, the maps layout was focused on the main mode. So for example, Dam of Van Peak, this was mainly designed for the rush map, while another map like Caspian Border, it was designed as a conquest map. So this meant that from the start, the level designers had a mission to make a map that's not only designed to play well for a specific mode, but it also includes objectives and scenarios that fits the mission that you are on. So as an example, if you play Rush on Dam of Van Peak, you start out by assaulting a military base. And later, when you've done that, you need to escape from that base, and you do that by jumping down through the helicopter platform that's like high up in the sky, and then you go all the way down. You come to some area, and then you get the service tunnel that you need to go through, and basically in the end you make your escape through a construction area. So this is like a whole story, like this is a whole cinematic scenario that you do, but in the more recent games, since Battlefield 4, the focus has instead been that they mainly create the maps for conquest, right? And then they shoehorn in the other modes like Rush into those maps. So in the end, this leads to maps that are a little bit half-baked sometimes, instead of being specialized. And I think that's really sad because it removes the cinematic element, it removes parts of the story, and it just kind of feels like you're in some sort of map that's designed for pretty much everything. And I think, there are some exceptions, I would say. Definitely, for example, in Battlefield 1, there are some maps that are more specialized. But I say in general, and I think especially in Battlefield 4, most of the maps, they feel very focused on conquest. Maybe Parasol Storm is really great for Rush, but most other maps, I feel like they're very, very conquest-based. So I really want to see a return to making maps for modes, and in particular Rush mode, which is my favorite mode. And I think, Battlefield hasn't been able to peak Rush mode since Battlefield 3. So I really hope to see a great comeback for Rush that is really cinematic, has really epic scenarios that you feel like, wow, I'm in a movie, and you get really motivated to take out these targets, right? And, not just some random radio station in the middle of the field that doesn't seem to have a purpose. I want to go into a base, and I want to assault, and I want to capture, and I want to, I want to feel that I'm part of a real operation, and that it's kind of like a movie or something. All right, so these are my 5 points. So there's obviously a lot more that on my wish list, but for the sake of keeping this video at reasonable length, this is what I had. So yeah, let me know if you guys like this video or if I should make a new one. And yeah, just 2 more days to go until we see the reveal of the multiplayer trailer. And yeah, really looking forward to see that, and I hope you guys are pumped too. And yeah, I hope to see you guys soon again. All right, bye bye.